Hey guys, it's me, Holly Madison. Welcome back to my channel. I'm running late, so I'm putting on my makeup while I'm doing this video. I'm headed out to Vegas today, but I wanted to get this video in before I left. And today we are talking about questions you guys have about my books, Down the Rabbit Hole and the Vegas Diaries. If you'd hit the like and subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it. I pulled 20 of those questions. I tried to pick questions that were not redundant, questions that I hadn't answered before in any videos. And of course, I'm saving the craziest ones for last, so keep watching. Sandra asks, was it cringe for you to rewatch Girls Next Door in order to write your book? I actually didn't rewatch any episodes when I was in the writing process. I started writing the book in 2013, so I'd been away from that for like 4 or 5 years. And my memory is usually pretty sharp, and it was back then, and I just remembered everything. I didn't have to go back and look at any of my scrapbooks or notes or day planners or anything from the era. I have since for other reasons, but I didn't have to go back and look. My memory was super sharp. I had it all off the top of my head. I didn't need to like rewatch or reference anything. Now those memories take a little longer to come back, because after I finished my book, I just kind of gave myself permission to like let it go. So I always compare it to that scene in Inside Out, that Pixar movie where the forgetters come and like take away the useless memories. But back then I had no problem like recalling any of it, so I didn't have to go back and rewatch. Haley asks, what room did you like best in the mansion? I think the prettiest room was the living room. It had really beautiful molded ceilings, and it was very classic looking. That was the room I always did my interviews in Girls Next Door. So when you see me like sitting in a chair and they're like cutting away to interview me, that was the room. Tiffany asks, were you ever scared to move out? Yeah, that was a huge reason I was there for so long. And because there were times when I was just going crazy and really wanted to leave, but I was scared of getting back out into the real world and being judged and being known as this girl who like lived at the mansion, because right when I moved in, I felt like the way everybody looked at me completely changed, and I wasn't ready to deal with that. I wanted to like build something for myself and kind of have a safety net before I left. So yeah, there was a lot of fear about leaving, especially since right when I moved in, maybe a couple months after, a bunch of the girls moved out and new ones came and took their place. And of the ones who moved out, I would hear stories come back about them that they had like gotten into really bad situations or had to move back home when I knew that wasn't what they wanted to do. And it was just constant stories of like bad things happening to them and cars getting repossessed and then going into like escorting and stuff like that. So that created a really bad imprint in me right away, where I was like, oh wow, I really need to have my stuff together before I leave here, because it's not the stepping stone I might have thought it could be. You know, it was almost like a step down, like something that could really stigmatize you. So yeah, for sure. Michelle asks, did you have a lot of things to pack up and take with you when you left? I did. I had a couple of storage closets at the house, because I did like all the Christmas decorating that was in the living room, like all the Christmas ornaments and, you know, like the Christmas village and stuff like that. That was mine, plus all the costumes I had from all the parties over the years. So I probably have like 3 storage closets of stuff over there. And I also had like a sewing room in the house across the street, as random as that sounds. So I had all this stuff, and I had somebody pack it up for me, because when I was ready to leave, I was ready to leave and just get out of there as fast as possible. I wanted to physically be away from the property because it was so awkward. So I had it packed up for me. Some of the stuff I ended up not getting. I don't know, it got lost along the way. And, you know, I asked about it afterward, but it was always like, I got the brush off like, oh, well, if there was something that we didn't know what it was, it probably got sent to one of our numerous storage buildings, and, you know, we'd never be able to find it. So I was just out of luck. There was also like artwork by some cool artists that he had been gifted of the 3 of us, of Bridget and Kendra and I. And at one point, like not long after I moved out, I had asked, like, if you, like, I didn't ask him, I asked his secretary, but I'm like, if he doesn't want those anymore, like, obviously, because, you know, it's something that, like, his new girl wasn't thrilled about having around. I'm like, if he doesn't want those, like, I'll take mine, and, like, maybe Bridget and Kendra want theirs. And nobody could find them, and it was just kind of assumed that somebody tossed them out. Not him, because he's a pack rat, but... And Juna Fox asks, how was it like when you told him you were leaving? Well, after I told Hef I was leaving, it was pretty awkward because it was one of those breakups that the other person doesn't want to accept. Like, nobody likes having to break up with somebody. But when they don't accept that breakup and there's like a living situation where it takes a second to extract yourself from, that can be really awkward because I'm completely confrontation avoidant, and to have to like re-break up with someone and I moved down the hall, so I was out of his hair, stayed in a room just to finish shooting the scenes I had left to shoot for Girls Next Door. And it was just awkward. Like, anytime I'd run into him in the hallway, he would always like give me these guilt talks or like beg on me for wearing a cross necklace or something. And it was really uncomfortable and weird and a lot of guilt tripping. It's like, dude, you had like multiple girlfriends this whole time and now all of a sudden I'm getting guilt tripped for leaving? Like, what even is that? Michelle asks, was it hard to reserve Disneyland for your wedding? And another person asked, how was it private? It was private because we did it after the park closed. I got married in New Orleans Square and it was after the park closed. And it was in September. So the park closed kind of early, I think 9 o'clock. So the wedding was like at 10. And it wasn't hard. I went through Disney Weddings and reserved it. I'm not sure how many weddings they do at Disneyland in California. I know it's a whole industry in Disney World and there's weddings there constantly, but it's definitely more rare in California, and definitely way back when I did it like 8 years ago, it was very, very rare. I was the first person to ever have a wedding in New Orleans Square, and it wasn't hard, but I don't know like how if there's a limit to how many they do or anything like that. But yeah, it was a great experience. It was great dealing with the people at Disney Weddings. They were so helpful and they made the whole thing seem really easy. So I definitely wouldn't describe it as hard. Sorry guys, I have a sinus infection, so I'm like sniffing through this whole thing. Haley asks, what drew you to the Vegas residency? If you don't know, I was in a show on the Vegas Strip at Planet Hollywood for 4 years. I loved it. It was so fun. And what drew me to that was I had fallen in love with burlesque ever since I became a fan of Dita Von Teese. So I'd been super into that for years, and I had been asked to do a guest spot at the Crazy Horse Paris, which was this little Parisian cabaret, like a version of the one they have in Paris at the MGM. It's not there anymore, sadly, but that was my favorite. And I was supposed to do a guest spot there. And I was going out to Vegas for photo shoots and to meet with them. And I just realized I really loved Vegas. And when I decided I was going to move out of the mansion, I was like, I want to try living in Vegas and doing the show. And I got into a relationship and he was like, you're not doing the Crazy Horse show. You're not doing a show where you wear a thong and blah, blah, blah. Okay, whatever. But in a way, it was good that I didn't do that, because a bigger, better show, which led to like a longer residency and a way bigger paycheck, came along. So it was kind of meant to be. You know, sometimes you hit these bumps in the road and better stuff comes along. Tracy Amber asks, was the season 5 finale staged when you left for Vegas? Had the photo shoot already happened? I get asked this a lot because for Girls Next Door, one of the last scenes I had to shoot, like when I was still like living in the house but not with Hef anymore, was just a scene where I'm walking out the door with like, I think I had like a roll-on luggage bag or something like that. And I just give him a hug and I say, oh, I'm leaving to go to Vegas. And nothing more is said. It's not said that I met somebody. It's not said that Hef and I had broke up. It's just said that I'm going to Vegas. And I think the reason they did that was twofold. I think one, like they always wanted to portray Hef as like the most desirable ladies man, like nobody could ever be interested in another man. So forget that part. And also, I think they just wanted to leave it open-ended so I could come back if I wanted to, because they were always trying to get me to come back. And they had planned to do Girls Next Door season 6 about me working at the studio with the other women who are coming in to shoot Playmate. And it just kind of threw a wrench in their plan when I kind of broke everything off, which felt so sudden to everybody else, but not everybody else involved in the show. I mean, but not to me, because I'd been miserable for a while. But yeah, to answer your question, I had already broke it off with Hef. That was just a scene they needed to kind of explain why I was leaving, though it didn't explain anything. It basically just said I was leaving. Lucy asks, do you still talk to Steven, your makeup guy, or the salon owner that did your hair? Steven's awesome. I haven't kept in touch with him. He actually never did my makeup. He did Bridget's and Kendra's. And as for the salon owner that did my hair, Laurent, he's amazing. Love him. I didn't keep going to that salon, A, because I moved to Vegas, but also it just felt kind of weird because, of course, the second we left, everybody who moved into the mansion after us, like Crystal, the twins, they were all going to the salon using the same hairdressers we used. And of course, that's to be expected because that was where, well, actually, it's not to be expected. I mean, they could choose to go anywhere they want to get their hair done. It doesn't have to be that one place. It just felt weird. I mean, looking back at how cloney everything was and how when you get into that situation, it's kind of scary and you feel like, or at least I felt this way, like I was always going to get in trouble if I didn't do things the right way. Like, yeah, you might be like, okay, I'm just going to go to the same hairdresser the other girls did because that's safe. But from like my perspective, it just feels kind of weird to be living a life for a while and you have these little things that kind of feel like they're your own in a world where you're not allowed to be yourself. And then these other women come along, and I'm not saying all of them, but there were a few of them who came along and they just like morph into your spot and like do everything the way you did. And they go to Disneyland all the time and they do all the things. And it's just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's just weird. Like, I don't want to be too judgy because like I said, moving in there is scary and you kind of feel like you can't step outside of bounds and you only want to do what's safe or you're going to get yelled at. I don't know. It's just a weird feeling for me. I didn't really make a point of going back there, keeping in touch, not because of him. He was lovely, but I just wanted to separate myself from that whole machine. And on that topic, like this wasn't really the case for me, but I know with some other people, they had made some close friends within the social circle at the mansion that they felt were their close friends. But like when they moved out and the other girlfriends moved in, those close friends glommed on to the new girlfriend. And it's just a weird feeling when you think somebody was your friend, but you realize they weren't at all. They were glommed onto you because of your position. Like, it's just like a creepy, weird feeling. Like you might be sitting back and going, well, what do you expect? But when you're in it and you're living it and you think you have like a friendship with somebody for over the years and then they just like bounce onto your replacement like it's not even a different person, that is a weird feeling. You feel very duped. Kisabel asks, what was your favorite part of Dancing with the Stars? Definitely the costumes. I loved going up and meeting with Randall every week and he would show you the sketch. And, you know, you would see the costume come to life and they were also sparkly and pretty. I bought all my costumes after I left, so I still have them all. I love them. Toto Africa 88 asks, were there any moments you felt like you could be yourself authentically? I assume they mean when I was at the mansion. Very rarely. I think the only moments where I really felt like I could be myself is like if I were in Bridget's room scrapbooking with her and we were by ourselves. Or maybe with her sister or something, because I always felt like I was under this microscope. I felt like I couldn't step out of bounds or do anything wrong, or I'd get yelled at or upset Hef or something. And there were always photographers at every dinner, every event, videographers at all the parties. Of course, we went into shooting the reality show. I had no privacy because I didn't even have my own room, and there were people coming in and out of that room all the time, all day long. So very rarely did I ever feel like I could be myself. I always felt like I was on display and had to like behave a certain way. So, and that can get stressful. Like it's not the worst problem in the world, kind of like a first world problem. But when you've been living like that for 7 years and kind of like the person at the top of the food chain has like weird expectations and unrealistic expectations, it's just, it gets to be a lot. Fresca B asks, what was your favorite pictorial that you got to be a part of? When we did Playboy, we did 4 different issues. We had 4 different covers and 3 of those had pictorials inside. And definitely my favorite was the last one because we got to shoot separately. We each shot with a different photographer and we each shot a different cover. So that same month the magazine came out, but there were 3 different covers, like you could collect them all. And when you lined them up, like the background was continuous. It was kind of cool. And the reason I like that is because when we were shooting our first 2 pictorials, we weren't really allowed to like be by ourselves. Like the first pictorial we shot, they did pictures of us individually. Those pictures didn't get used in the pictorial. And of course, like looking back, I see that him wanting pictures of all 3 of us together in the magazine, it's this like pervy fantasy of like the 3 of us being into each other, like if we're all naked in the same picture. But that was never true. And no offense to anybody, like I know we all felt the same way. Like that would have just been weird. Like one of those people was one of my closest friends. We were never into each other at all. sexually in any way like that. And so that was completely fake. But also besides that, I felt like the reason he only ever wanted us to be in pictures together, because by the time we did the second pictorial, we asked to do individual photos as well, since our individual photos weren't used in the first pictorial. And he said no. And I just felt like there was kind of like a control aspect in that too. Like he was trying to tell us, the three of you aren't good enough to carry a pictorial by yourselves. Like a playmate can, like I can pick this random girl and say she's so pretty and she can, you know, carry this whole pictorial by herself. But it takes three of you to equal one playmate. That was what I kind of walked away from with that, because I was always being made to feel like I wasn't good enough or I wasn't pretty enough. So by the time we got to shoot our own pictorials, and the only reason that even happened was because the producer of our show offered to pay out of the Girls Next Door budget for that pictorial. And the magazine was struggling for money at the time. So, you know, of course they went with it and the show was a hit. So why not? But if it had been up to Hef and he would have never let us do like the pictures by ourselves. I just think he didn't want us to feel like we were pretty enough or good enough. Like he always wanted us to have that inferiority complex so that he had control. Stacy asks, who was the guy in the boy band you dated? Okay, in my second book, well, both books, I change a lot of names. And I can't tell you, like if I change the name once, it defeats the whole purpose if I'm going to say who it is. So I understand your curiosity, but I can't reveal. Michelle asks if Hef was a sociopath, a narcissist, or both. And this answer might surprise you, but I honestly think if you would have asked him when he was alive, are you a narcissist? I think he would have said yes. Because like these days when we talk about narcissists, we think of people who treat other people really badly in relationships. Maybe 10 years ago, that term wasn't used in pop culture the way it is now. A narcissist more meant somebody who was really into themselves. And he was very into himself. And I don't think he would have even denied that. I think if you would have asked him while he was still alive, are you a narcissist? He probably would have laughed and said yes. Corey asks, if you could go back in time, would you do it all again? And that's a tricky question because there's kind of two ways you could think about that question. One way is, do you mean, could I go back and change anything? Probably not, only because I really love what I learned from the journey and where I ended up now and the good things I did manage to get out of it. And even the bad things I experienced. I think one of my missions here in this lifetime is to tell other people about it. So if other people are in bad relationships similar to this, they can get help. Or if people have been in relationships like this, they can realize, oh, I'm not crazy. It happened to other people too. Or maybe other people can read this and like recognize the red flags if they ever encounter somebody who's like this. So I think that's all important. And no, I wouldn't go back and change anything just to like make my life more picture perfect. But the other way you could, so anyway, so when people ask, would you do it all again in that context? I would say, yes, I would do it all again. But then there's another way of thinking about that question. Like when you ask me, would I do it all again? Do you mean I could go back in time in my own body and relive it? Absolutely not. I would go nuts. Not that there weren't ever good things about the situation or good times or fun times, but overall that situation was so stressful and I was there for so long and just dealing with the BS and the gaslighting and all the crazy stuff. I could never do that again. And I don't feel like that with other phases in my life. Like if somebody asked me, would you go back and relive the years you were in a show in Vegas? But the mansion years, I would not want to go back and like have to relive every tedious day. Like, and I try and think like, knowing what I know now, would I be better mentally equipped to just go through the motions? I don't know, maybe, but it just doesn't, my gut reaction is no, I would not want to do that. Like I try to wonder, like knowing what I know now and like not taking his, if I could go back and like be mentally prepared and like not take his manipulation seriously and like try to not let it affect my self-esteem. Like maybe I could go back and have more fun with the situation. But then I think about like going out and how boring that got and how I was wasted like every single night we went out. Because I was bored and because I was like dreading, you know, going back home and everything. I just would not want to redo that. Like, I could handle redoing like the Girls Next Door years, but I lived there for 3 years before. When I talk about having a really miserable time at the mansion, the worst of it were those 3 years. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. Like, when people want to come down on me for complaining, like, what are you complaining about? Like, that made you famous, as if fame is everything. And they just never got to see what life was like before the cameras started rolling, because things were so different. There was a different cast of characters living at the house. Like, if people could really have a clue what those first 3 years were like they would get what I'm saying when I say it wasn't a good scene. Carolee Rose asks, who was your least favorite person in the mansion when there were 7 or 8 girlfriends? Well, that changed a couple times, because there were like 2 completely different rosters of women during the first like 3 years that I lived there. And I would say my least favorite person from the first roster was one who was kind of a bully. She was very forceful and very much in your face, and somebody who would like get in my face and yell at me. And so that was my least favorite person there. And then there was a second roster of women. And at the time, there was one woman I really didn't like, because she would always try and start drama low key. And she would like tell lies to Hef about me, and then he would come back and like ask about it, and she was always trying to get me replaced, because I think she felt if there was somebody else in that spot who was like more comfortable like asking for more money or like negotiating for better Christmas gifts or things like that, that she would benefit from it. Emma asks, please talk about some of the dark rumors of the mansion and Hollywood in general. I don't know exactly what you're referring to. I can guess it's maybe the rumor of the tunnels. So a handful of years ago, I don't know what year this was, maybe it's like 2016 or something, Playboy, as an April Fool's joke, put out this story complete with blueprints about how there were tunnels dug under the mansion that led to other actors' houses. I think it was like Warren Beatty or James Caan or Jack Nicholson or all 3. And over time, of course, that gets absorbed into like QAnon lore. And now people are like, oh, there were like trafficking tunnels under the mansion. And if there are any tunnels, I'm completely unaware of them. There were like things on the property that I would call secret passages. Like, you could go like through the basement and under and pop out in the gym and stuff like that. But as far as like tunnels that would go off the property, never heard of them. As far as I know, that was just an April Fool's joke they put out. Although, who could have known? Like, in 2016, you put out an April Fool's story. I don't think anybody could have predicted like how crazy people get on the internet and how much they believe weird conspiracy theories. Like, on an episode of Girls Next Door, I was joking, saying I'm a clone, just like making fun of like how all of Hef's girlfriends are expected to look alike and everything like that. And now there are seriously people who think I'm a clone because I said that. Like, can't joke about anything these days. But I mean, even if I were to like entertain that rumor, I would say no, because the cost to build tunnels that span across like Beverly Hills or wherever like Jack Nicholson or whoever lived, for what? So they can walk over to supposedly traffic. I mean, trafficking wasn't part of the Playboy rumor that they started. It was just supposed to be like a fun thing, like, ooh, we can go party at each other's houses, we have secret tunnels. But the trafficking thing was added on by conspiracy theorists. And I just feel like none of those people are important enough. Like, if there were going to be tunnels, wouldn't it be like government officials or billionaires or people like that? It's going to be like a guy who runs a dirty magazine. Okay, I can see that, because that's somebody who the government could like throw under the bus. Like, if they were to build tunnels and then get caught, like blame it on him. But like actors, random actors, like, and I know actors were way more important in the 70s and like bigger figures and stuff than they are now, but I just don't think, no offense, I just don't think those people are like important enough to have government trafficking tunnels. Just my opinion. Krista asks, has anyone else come out with the same experience as you? Which I think means like a negative experience about the Playboy Mansion. Yeah, people have, but it just tends to get buried under the rug, and it's been over the years. And I have reason to believe there's a project coming out later this year where more women are going to come forward with their stories. And I haven't seen this project, but I'm really interested to see it, because I feel like I'm the only one who really comes out and talks about it. I think for so many women who've been through that system, which granted, not everyone had the exact same experience I did. Some people may have had a better experience. Some people may have had worse. But people don't want to come out and talk about it being negative, which I can understand in some ways, because when you come forth with a negative story, people attack you. So it's kind of a burden. So I understand they don't want to do that. Also, they don't want to get hate from people who still identify as being part of Hef's circle. And there's a lot of people that they might still be friends with who were people in his inner circle who would just come up for like dinner nights and movie nights and to the big parties, and they never saw how he treated people behind the scenes. Like, they think they know him so well, but they really only saw the side of him that was like a great host to his friends. And they don't want to like turn those people against them. And I think for other people as well, they tend to look back at that period of their life as kind of like peaking in high school is how I describe it. Like, they look back as like, that was like their homecoming queen era. And that's fine. Like, I shouldn't tell anybody what to take away from their experience, just like nobody can tell me what to take away from my experience. But I think when you really want to preserve something as kind of this amazing era, you don't ever want to even talk about the downside. Like, I know there's people there and they think of the whole thing as positive, but I know they also experience the negative because they won't like talk about it publicly because they don't want to deal with the backlash, or they don't want other people to think of them as like a victim or somebody who had to go through it, or they just don't want to feel beholden to like tell people details. Because even before I ever was in the magazine or did a reality show or wrote anything about it, when people would find out I just lived at the house, you know, perfect strangers always felt like they had a right to just ask me the most personal, most disgusting questions. And I know what it feels like to just want to shut that down and be like, oh, it's not what you think. It's great. He's the nicest guy. We're all so happy. Because it just shuts people down, because no one wants to open up about their trauma or like the dark secrets in their life or the bad things in their life to like a stranger on the street. So you kind of get in that habit. So I get it, but maybe one day somebody will come out. But so far, sometimes I feel like I'm the only one. Emma asks, what was the hardest part of the writing process for you? Writing a book for the first time wasn't hard for me because I was so eager to get my story out. I just had this kind of like passion behind it. Like, I just wanted to unload. So that was very easy. I think the part I struggled with was just talking about sex. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't think that was where any of, like, I didn't see the point in like being graphic or gratuitous about it. I didn't think that was the important part of my story. I described it once, and luckily it was a very routine thing. It never really changed, so I never had to write about it again in the story after describing it one time, except to update and say, okay, this is when we stopped having sex. It wasn't even until recently, like when I did the interview on Call Her Daddy, that I actually articulated like how humiliating the whole thing was, because it wasn't just sex. It wasn't just sex with somebody who wouldn't have been considered conventionally attractive because of his age. It was humiliation on a weekly basis, because you're there having sex in front of a room full of people who none of them like you, or most of them don't like you, and they're all watching you and they're all talking smack about you, and like you can, even though the music's loud, you can hear bits and pieces of it, and it's just like horrifying. Yeah. So how do I end this video on a high note after that? Anyway, thank you for the questions. I like talking about it, oddly enough. I just feel like I'm getting it off my chest. And sometimes I feel like not everybody's going to understand your story, but you can write a whole dang book and sometimes people still don't get it. So anyway, I am ready to get on with my day, and let me know what kind of video you guys would like to see next. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.